I know what it's like to be basically stuck in your bed and how hard it is to get out of the house to see the doctor, but also for access, because I wanted to make it as accessible to patients as possible. So it basically created the doctor's practice that I dreamed that would be my dream experience as a patient.
Hello and Happy New Year from Calling in Sick. I'm your host, Alex Wildison. I can't believe it's 2025. Boy, this year has flown by. Thank you guys for all of the love and support and being a part of this journey with me for the last 6 months now. I can't believe it. My heart feels so full. I'm so grateful for all of you guys. This week, I have a special treat to kick off the new year, and it is a founder who is a spoonie, and she has built a company that is revolutionizing the way chronically ill patients move through Western medicine. And I cannot wait to tell you guys more about it. It's a game changer, and it's giving me hope right off the bat for 2025. Before we dive into everything, quick housekeeping. Please make sure to like, subscribe, and follow, and send this to any of your friends or family members that work in the medical system. They need to listen to this episode, and hopefully they can do something to get involved, just like we can maybe do something to get involved to help Danielle and her team at Chronius Care. Quick life updates from me. I am on vacation right now, celebrating my 5-year wedding anniversary with my amazing husband, Saint Cooper, as we kindly refer to him in this community and family that we have. We are staying at the hotel that we honeymooned at 5 years ago. It feels very full circle. At that point in my life, I was not even a year into my PAN vasculitis diagnosis. We spent every single day out on the beach reading, getting sunshine, and I way overdid it, I know, shocking, with the sunshine, and developed such a painful rash up my legs, or I guess it was my right leg, up my right leg. And it really showed where the vasculitis was active. You could really see each of those veins that were inflamed, and it was incredibly painful. And then that kind of kicked off a year of not great health and COVID, which was just everyone's favorite year of late. But now we're here, and I feel like I've grown up 15 years probably in the last 5 years, both from an identity perspective, a chronic illness mindset perspective, and a chronic illness management perspective, and also just a life perspective, I guess. Feel like I've fit a lot of growth in, packed a good punch in the last 5. And I think the biggest growth point maybe in these years is that I am comfortable in the unknown and uncomfortable now, or at least more comfortable. Probably, I don't know if anyone's ever so comfortable in the unknown, but I'm at a place where if a new symptom percolates, I don't feel like I need to go to the emergency room that day. I am at a point where if I have a massive pain spike, I know in my soul, I'm not dying, I'm just having some pain, and I've got to do everything that I can, but ride it through. And last but not least, I feel like I have my people. I know who my people are. I have grown up a little bit to understand that you can still have people in your life that don't understand your health, and that is okay. It's not about everyone fully understanding each other. It's just loving each other for what we can do and how we can show up. Well, with all of that reflecting, I guess I should also do some projecting into this new year. So I'm really stoked the first episode of the new year is about Chronius Care and a new direction and a new take and a new model and mold for handling and processing chronic illness. I think there's a lot of great things on the horizon. I think being a chronically ill person, it's really easy to just try to settle and accept with what is, because that's a way of processing and coping with our lives and diagnoses. But there's some cool shit happening. There's new tech coming out. AI is changing the medical field. And there are companies and groups of individuals that want to make life better and easier for us. So I, for one, am very excited about what's on the horizon. And I'm so glad I got to bring Danielle Lazarowitz onto the show to talk about hope and the future of chronic illness management and care. But before we dive into that, Alex's picks of the week. So, of course, I have to talk about this thing because, guys, this shit's just so damn good. Magic Minds. I know that all of us want to start the new year fresh and on a new page and new chapter, and we want to bring this new energy into the new year full of hope and excitement and lots of spoons. And I don't know about y'all, but sometimes I have been known to fuel a lack of spoons with a lot of coffee, and unfortunately that gives me jitters, anxiety, shakiness, and not a lot of mental clarity, just maybe anxiety. But Magic Minds, I've been drinking this stuff, and it is awesome. You do not get the jitters. You do not get the anxiety. You do get some mental clarity. Brain fog actually gets a little bit better, I will say. And it tastes pretty damn good. So good, I'm going to take one right now. Anyway, Magic Minds is amazing. Highly recommend if you guys are looking to switch from coffee to something a little bit more anti-inflammatory in nature that still helps with the energy. Give Magic Minds a try. I've got information in the description below, and you can use discount code CallingInSick to get a little bit off of your first purchase. My second pick of the week is this travel-sized gravity blanket. It's 7 pounds. I flew with it on my carry-on because I'm a psychopath. And it has been so nice. It's very stress relieving. It calms me down. I actually, unfortunately, had a panic attack on the first night that we got to Miami. I think I just was so riled up from the travel and from trying to get a bunch of things done before the end of the year. The stress just had built up, and it hit me. It packed a good 1-2 on me last night. But I had my gravity blanket. I had my service doggies with me. I had Cooper with me. And we breathed right on through that one and survived. And I'm very grateful that I packed my little travel mini gravity blanket with me. I think I'm going to bring it everywhere and be that girl now. I've always liked a good blankie, and here's for upgrading to a anxiety-friendly blankie. I bought it off Amazon. I'll link the one that I got. I think they all kind of work the same, but if you guys have a favorite brand that you think I should try out, let me know. And without further ado, let's dive into Chronius Care. So I think so many of us have had the experience of interacting with medical providers that either don't understand our diseases, don't know anything about our diseases, don't have great bedside manner, or unempathetic or gaslight us. Well, and all of us probably at some point have thought, man, I wish that there was someone to help me navigate this. I wish there was a guidebook. I wish there was programming that told me how to do this because it's overwhelming. And also on the same coin, but the other side, it is fucking exhausting to manage your chronic illness. Working a job potentially, being a member of society and your family, and then also managing all of the logistics of being chronically ill, scheduling appointments, talking to insurance companies, talking to pharmacies, talking to physical therapies, trying to figure out why certain things you're eating or putting on your body are making you feel way fucking worse, and questioning, how are you going to get a diagnosis? Well, Danielle Lazarowitz had a similar journey. And when you hear her story, I think so many of you are going to nod your head and be like, yep, that sounds right. But she got so frustrated with how her care had been handled or mishandled at times that she decided to kind of say, fuck it, I'm going to build my own solution, and I have nothing to lose. And alas, she had a lot to gain because she founded a kick-ass, badass company called Chronius Care. And Chronius Care is currently only available in Florida, but they have expansion plans. In the next 5 years, she wants to be a national provider. And I think maybe, just perhaps, you will be so inclined after this episode that you might want to help her out. So her contact information and email is also below in the description. Chronius Care is your quarterback. It's your patient advocate. It is the resource and handbook that we all have been wishing and praying for. But you know who's going to say it better than me? Danielle. So let's dive into this episode. Thanks for tuning in, and I love you guys, and Happy New Year. All right, everybody, I'm so excited to welcome my amazing guest today. You have Danielle with Chronius Care on with me. Hi, Danielle.
Hi, so nice to speak with you today.
So nice to speak with you today, too. I'm super excited to bring awareness to what you're doing to our community. I think you're building something that is very much needed, and I know everyone's going to be really, really excited to learn more about it. But before we dive into the amazing company that you're building, I would love to kind of give everyone the background of who you are, your health journey, and basically what brought you to the point of wanting to build your own company because there wasn't a solution out there that worked.
Yeah. So I grew up in Connecticut, just in a suburb of New York City, and had a relatively normal childhood, didn't have a lot of health issues growing up, was big into dance, and I was a theater kid. And so my health issues didn't really start raising their ugly head until I was a few years out of college. So coming out of college, I ended up landing one of my dream jobs, which was working in the White House as an economic policy advisor for President Obama.
That must have been amazing.
Yeah, it was kind of like a pinch me moment, and one of those situations where if you didn't walk through the gates every day kind of feeling in awe that you were there, then it was time to go.
Yes.
But
That's maybe a great rule of thumb for like a lot of things in life.
Yes, definitely. It was an unbelievable experience, but it was a very fast-paced and demanding job. I was working crazy hours. And so when I started to feel symptoms of fatigue, headaches, that just felt like a little off, I assumed it was just because I was working myself to the bone.
Right.
But I did go to my primary care doctor and just explain some of these kind of vague symptoms that I was having that weren't really that life altering that I couldn't do stuff, but it was noticeable. And I was lucky enough to have a PCP who decided to actually like test for a bunch of different things instead of just dismiss my symptoms as, oh, you're probably just stressed.
Huge.
And so one of the things that she tested me for was some autoimmune tests, and including in that was an ANA test and then a panel, including a panel for Sjogren's syndrome. And I remember my doctor called me and said I needed to come in to talk to her about the results.
Ugh, the dreaded call.
Yeah, and that was kind of the first and only time where a doctor has said, like, you need to come in for me to talk to you. And I really had no clue what it could be. I didn't even really know what she was testing me for. So
Were you scared then?
Was scared. Yeah, I was really scared. And, I was like, am I dying? I was really nervous. But when I came in, she basically said, okay, you tested positive on your ANA test, so you have some sort of autoimmune disease, and you tested positive for SSA antibody, which means you likely have Sjogren's syndrome. But she said, we can't just diagnose you based off of this. So you're going to have to do this long list of tests to get the diagnosis. So even though that was my diagnosis, like spoiler alert, like that was my first diagnosis, it took another 6 months of different testing to confirm it. I had to go to the rheumatologist and do different testing. I had to go to the ophthalmologist. I had to get a lip biopsy. All of these things that were very difficult to manage, getting all of these tests done and seeing all these specialists while you're working full time, that it was, very difficult. But I ended up getting diagnosed with Sjogren's, and I didn't really know what that meant. I had never heard of it before. I didn't know anyone in my life that had an autoimmune disease. And when I Googled it initially, it didn't sound great, and I was nervous on how this would impact my life. Mm-hmm. But the truth is that I had a pretty mild case when I was first diagnosed, and so I was able to handle it with getting on some medication, making, a few like lifestyle changes. And for several years, I kind of had it, but it wasn't a huge impact on my life. I still ran half marathons and, went to grad school. And so all of this felt like, I can live with this, even though it's not ideal, obviously.
Like an annoyance, but not a hindrance, would you say?
Yes.
Okay. And looking back,
Yeah.
real quick. Looking back when you were developing your first symptoms and whatnot, two questions. One, was there a specific symptom that made you go, some like these are adding up to be something, or was it just all around, okay, there's too many weird symptoms?
I think at that point, it was that fatigue that anyone who has a chronic illness knows it is very different than being tired. And
Yes.
it is that kind of like bone, like to the bone fatigue of like, I can't really move.
Walking in mud.
Yeah, that was the biggest symptom. I'll
Okay.
say I had another diagnosis process in 2021 where things changed for me for the worse. And there were a lot more symptoms then that were, okay, clearly something is very wrong. It was
Okay.
much more subtle when for my first diagnosis of Sjogren's. And I think I'm really lucky that I had a PCP who knew to test for some of those things
Yeah.
because I think I very easily could have been one of those stories of, it takes on average like 5 years to get diagnosed with autoimmune disease. I think
Absolutely.
that definitely could have been me if I didn't have the PCP knowing kind of what things to look for when I said some keywords, right? Like
A hundred
fatigue that
percent.
doesn't go away and joint pain, stuff like that.
100%. And you're so right. Like using those keywords only helps you so much. It takes the other person understanding that lingo and connecting the dots for you. So, like a PCP that can help you navigate this and understands autoimmunity is such a game changer. Similarly, my PCP is the one that was sent me to go see a specialist and said,
Yeah.
this is kind of out of my scope, but I'm pretty sure you've got like more autoimmune things going on than we know about.
Yeah.
And thankfully, it was her sending me to see a dermatologist that led to me finding out I had vasculitis. But
Yeah.
yeah, the PCP is a massive game changer. And I think a lot of people either one, don't have a PCP, or two, have a PCP that they utilize as like an urgent care. So it's not someone that they're like close with that really intimately understands your medical history and who you are, which is makes it all the more challenging.
Yeah, I think it could really make or break the experience for you of getting on the right path or the wrong path.
Totally.
Or as you said, you don't get on the path at all if you don't really utilize them.
Yeah.
But the right PCP can make a difference. And I really felt that in kind of my second diagnostic journey, which was about 10 years after I was first diagnosed with Sjogren's.
Okay, tell us about that.
Yeah, and that's when I learned that kind of with one can come many different conditions. And
The domino effect.
yeah, exactly. So those symptoms that first started were things like my left eye started drooping and I couldn't figure out why. Like it kind of looked like I was
Terrifying.
permanently winking.
Okay.
Yeah. And I had a hard time carrying groceries from my car into my house. Like my arms were really weak. I had to like put them down multiple times while walking. And I started to feel almost what I felt like were panic attack symptoms, except I wasn't mentally feeling panicked. Like that heart racing feeling,
Yeah.
having shortness of breath. And when I went to my PCP about it, I was pretty dismissed of like, let's do some tests, but I don't really know what this is.
Was this
And
the
not
same
a
PCP from earlier
different,
too?
different
Okay.
PCP. Yeah,
So they
because I had
couldn't,
moved at that point.
and that's the hard part too, because they can't compare you to who you were maybe before those symptoms developed to who you are then. And so like that not having that consistency between a doctor can be so challenging.
Totally. And this was in early 2021. So kind of like, and like late 2020, early 2021. So also a very different medical environment of it being like still very active COVID, like the
System
vaccines hadn't come
overwhelm.
out yet. So it was a very different environment. So I think
Yeah.
also maybe it wasn't a priority compared to like the
Yeah.
crisis of COVID that was happening.
Well, the system was super overwhelmed at that point, and I think so many of us unfortunately slipped through the cracks during that time period.
100%. And really, in this situation, it was my eye doctor who was my like hero doctor, where my PCP was that hero doctor for me before. I
Yeah.
went to her saying, my eye is drooping and I don't know what's going on. Um, and she put an ice pack on my eye when I was in the office.
Uh-huh.
And magically, when she took the ice pack off, like 5 to 10 minutes later, my eye was back to normal. And she said, I think you have this autoimmune disease called myasthenia gravis, but it's pretty serious. And if you're having shortness of breath, like trouble breathing and stuff, you need to go to the ER right now, which is what I had. And I
Okay.
went to the ER saying, my doctor just sent me here. Here's what's going on. And they sent me home. They didn't do anything. They said, well, we don't know if this is what it is, and you just might be stressed. And they sent me home. But my symptoms kept getting worse. And I kept in touch with the doctor, and she said, you need to go back. So
Yeah.
I went back a week later and ended up in the neuro ICU for several days. Got officially diagnosed with myasthenia gravis and was put on a medication called IVIG in the hospital.
I'm on that medicine right now. Very familiar with it.
Yes. Uh, and then after I was, again, that was a diagnosis that I'd never heard of before.
Will
It
you
felt
walk us through that diagnosis? I'm familiar with it, but I like very surface level, and I'm sure everyone
sure.
else would love to know a little bit more about what it actually is.
Yeah, so myasthenia gravis, or a lot of patients call it MG, is an autoimmune disease that affects where the nerves connect with your muscles. And so it causes muscle weakness that's progressive. So it gets worse as the day goes on. Like as you get more tired, it gets worse.
Got it.
Sometimes people have just ocular myasthenia gravis, which just makes you have like your eye droop. And sometimes it can affect your whole body. Where it gets scary and also complicated is that it can cause like weakness in your arms or legs, like I have, or in your eyes, but it can also cause weakness in the muscles that help you swallow, or in the muscles like your diaphragm that help you breathe. And so,
Lovely.
yes, so you could go into something what they call a myasthenic crisis, in which you'd have to be on a ventilator until
Right.
they can get like your muscles better able to, work. And the challenge is that there's a lot of medications that you cannot take if you have myasthenia gravis, which has been in some ways the biggest challenge for me,
Yeah.
because it can trigger a myasthenic crisis. So that's like all beta blockers. That's a majority of antibiotics. It's a majority of anesthesia.
Wow.
So it's a lot of different medications, which makes it difficult to like do things that normal people would do, that wouldn't
You
be
have
scary, that then become like I really need to make sure and because a lot of doctors aren't aware, you have to be really on it to make sure that they're prescribing you the right things and advocate for yourself.
I was just going to say, like, if you don't become your own expert on that disease, it sounds like things could take a turn for the south very,
Yes, I
very
have
easily.
a printout of, what medications I cannot take that I bring when I go to the doctor because I found, especially when I need antibiotics, like I'm often prescribed one that I'm not supposed to take, and then I
Yep.
have to like say, actually, you can't prescribe this to me. Same with anesthesia. Like I've gone through surgeries since my diagnosis and have been okay, but it's you're at a much more serious level. You need to like talk with the anesthesiologist before
Right.
the thing. They have to do anesthesia a little bit differently for you, etc.
Were you before this diagnosis?
Yeah.
I always find that like there's a common thread between autoimmune patients, and it's usually like there was a perfect storm that kind of happened where it's like heightened stress, some kind of sickness that happened, and then one other factor. When you're looking back, is there a puzzle piece that looks like that for you or not yet?
I mean, not really. Obviously, like COVID times were stressful for everyone in general. It didn't come, I think at that point I hadn't had COVID yet. So it wasn't related to a COVID infection. So maybe from the stress, but like what I learned later is that if you have one autoimmune disease, you're more likely to get a second autoimmune disease. And
Truly.
I also got diagnosed with POTS in this period as well. And I learned that Sjogren's is like one of the biggest causes of POTS. So I think actually it all kind of stemmed from my original Sjogren's diagnosis.
That makes sense.
Um, and then maybe the stress of COVID and that whole experience just kind of lit the match on, the
Yeah.
tinder that was already there.
Will you walk us through a little bit about what the diagnostic process was? Because you were in the ICU when you got diagnosed with this. So what was that like? Because that seems very rare to get actually diagnosed with an autoimmune disease and that short of a time period and in the ER ICU setting nonetheless.
Yeah, so a few things. One, they did that ice pack test again on my eye, which was like not an official diagnosis, but a pretty clear indicator. Like it's basically the only thing that would cause like an eye to droop but get better with ice on it.
Got it.
And then there's also some blood tests that they were able to run immediately, some antibody tests. That there are people that there's like multiple sets of antibodies that can cause MG. And there's also people that are seronegative for MG, so it's not like a full diagnosis. But
Right.
basically, my symptoms were such that like they ruled out anything else that could be causing that. And then my blood work also indicated it.
Okay.
And they felt like the safest thing to do was they didn't officially diagnose me until after I left the hospital, but to put me on the treatment felt like the safest thing to do, given the
Totally.
symptoms that I was experiencing.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Post that diagnosis, what did your path look like? How did you find the right specialists and providers and take on this full-time job that is being chronically ill with now multiple diagnoses and further aggressive symptoms?
Yeah, I would say things kind of got worse for me before they got better, even with
Okay.
the MG diagnosis. So I ended up having a stroke a week after I got diagnosed with MG.
Holy cow.
And yeah, that was a surreal experience. I felt strangely calm when that was happening in the hospital. Like, I thought I'd be terrified, but I felt like
Yeah,
weirdly calm when it was happening. Luckily, I didn't have any like serious after effects of it. It was like a
good.
minor stroke. But I was basically, after that whole experience, completely bedbound.
I'm sure.
I had to move back home with my parents, which was very hard to do in your 30s because I
Yep.
had been totally independent and I couldn't even shower or feed myself.
Yeah.
At the time, I wasn't able to swallow really, so I was basically surviving on Ensure, and I was also like in the process of getting diagnosed with POTS as well, which was a difficult diagnosis to get because so many doctors dismissed me trying
So
to
many
get that.
doctors dismiss anything in that dysautonomia category
Yeah.
completely. It blows my mind, actually.
It's wild because it's so easy to diagnose in a way
Yeah.
because there's a clear criteria that if you like your heart rate raises above X
Yep.
amount and you go from like it's very easy to diagnose. And yet I was told I'm just dehydrated. I was told I'm just stressed, just take anti-anxiety medicine and that will help me. So I really had to like push to get that diagnosis. So it took a lot of like trying a bunch of different doctors in that time to find the right care team that actually
Right.
understood all of my conditions. And that's when things started to turn around for me. So once I had all of the diagnoses, and then I was able to be on medications that could actually help, I started to have a big difference. But it still took me about 6 months after I was diagnosed to be well enough to like move out on my own again, and things like that. So it was not an overnight process. So I think
No.
even these conditions, they're hard to get diagnosed, but even after, it takes time to like get to a regulated state. And my
Yeah.
treatment
And
regimen
honestly,
is,
that's even kind of fast. Like six
yeah,
months to go from that to being able to move back out. That's fast. That's
yeah.
really, really fast.
I feel like my journey was fast in that it was a
Yes.
year, and that's not fast when you're in it, but it was fast. But I mean, now I'm on IVIG infusions every 3 weeks that I have been for the last 3 years. I'm on heart medication. I'm on blood pressure medication. I'm on like neurological medications, so many
Yeah.
different things. I've had to do physical therapy, speech therapy, like it's a lot.
It's a
And you have
full-time
to
job.
stay on it. Yeah, it's a full-time job,
And you
really.
do you do have to be so accountable to yourself so that you don't regress or revert or try your best to prevent that from happening.
And
Without
it still happens. Like I've had
totally.
many flares over the last 3 years.
Yeah.
So
And you can
it
be
is
doing
not,
everything right and
yeah.
still get in a flare up. Like that's the one of the cruxes of all of this.
Yes, radical acceptance has been so critical for
Yes.
me in like being able to cope with everything.
I want to double down on that one. Where do you draw and where did you draw hope from during this time period where shit kept going wrong and it was like a domino of things going south? Where did you keep the fight in you? Or how did you?
I think a few things. One was obviously like having my friends and family to lean on, even though none of them had been through anything like what I was going through. Having that support was really helpful. I also have, for a very long time, even before, these new diagnoses, had been seeing a therapist who specializes in people with chronic illness. And
So
that's
huge.
been so helpful to be able to, work on like the grief around
Yes.
having these conditions. Cause like
And the
you're young,
identity.
I was young too. Like when I
Yeah.
was diagnosed, this was not the life that I wanted for myself.
Hell
And
no.
no, and like it's never going to go away.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of grief around that. And also like dealing with so many people telling you like, well, have you tried this and have you tried this? Like as if that will magically make you better. And if you hadn't done it, like that it's your fault kind of if you
Yes.
have what you have. So that has been super helpful for me. And I would
Good.
recommend that for anyone who's facing any chronic illness. I think
How
that support is critical.
how did you find your chronic illness therapist? Because I always think that getting that right is very important, like you're saying, but finding the specialist within the therapy world is like leveling up.
Totally. So, Psychology Today is a great resource to find therapists, and you can filter there. And one of the filter options is chronic illness, so that you can find therapists who self identify as serving patients with chronic illness. And then often, then you could read their bios and see if it sounds like a good fit. Like, is it prominent in their marketing materials or
Right.
not? And that's a good way to find someone. That's how I found my therapist who was excellent in supporting me.
That makes me really, really happy to hear that you had that and that you had your friends and family kind of gathering around you too. I know that that can be also a unique experience and some don't have that.
Yeah, I would say like I went into the Facebook groups a little bit as well, but sometimes it was overwhelming and kind of scary for me.
Very
Um,
negative.
yeah, it could be negative or just like you see how sick people are. And
Yeah.
sometimes it's good to be like you're not alone, but
Yeah.
sometimes it was like, oh God, is
Is
this
this
what it's going
me?
to be like for me? I also just tried to educate myself. So I didn't know anything about these diseases before I was diagnosed with them. So I watched videos of conferences and things like that because one, I had a lot of time in my hands being like
Totally.
stuck at home and not being able to work. So I tried to educate myself because I felt like the more I knew from reputable sources, the more I could advocate for myself and the more I had hope that like there are things you could do to help improve your quality of life, though I always had realistic expectations around like these are not conditions that you're going to be cured of necessarily.
Right. I that just resonates a ton for me. Similarly, I dove into the research, dove into the Facebook groups, trying to learn everything and anything that I could about PAN and what life would look like for me and what symptoms would be like for me.
Yeah.
And I think that was very, very important, especially when I was approaching and trying to find specialists.
Yeah.
I always talk about speed. You have to kind of speed date to find the one that's perfect for you and knows enough about your illness and whatnot. And it sounds like you did something similar, and maybe it was from those experiences that this idea of Chronius was born.
Yeah, I would say like on the how I found my doctor's piece, I definitely took the like crawl, run, walk
Yes.
model or crawl, walk, run model where it was like I needed people that I could get in quickly with immediately, whether or not they were the best fit just to get the tests done.
Yes.
My doctor that I'm with now, she specializes in patients who have Sjogren's and dysautonomia, which is like she's one of only two
Huge.
in the country. She had a year and a half long waiting list. So I had to find people that I could see in the interim to help me while I was waiting to see her. And then I could transition over. But yeah, that's really where the idea from Chronius came from, because I remember sitting in the ICU after my stroke where the doctors really didn't know what had caused my stroke, but also didn't seem that interested in kind of figuring out what's going on with like this, all of these different symptoms that I was having. And I remember trying to like get into Mayo Clinic because I knew there was a doctor there and everyone thinks of Mayo as like so comprehensive.
Right.
And I felt like I was applying to college trying to get into Mayo Clinic.
That's
Like,
such a perfect analogy.
yeah, because I was
Oh my
like
God.
printing out all my records, making that binder. My records were like 400 pages long from just like even a few months.
Yeah.
And it like, how do I position myself so they'll take my case?
Here's
'Cause at
my
that point,
medical CV.
yeah, basically. And at that point, I didn't have firm diagnoses on everything yet. Like the POTS still hadn't been diagnosed yet. And they wouldn't take my case. And at that point, I'm like, where do I go? Like my primary care doctor was of no help. She was basically like, I don't know, to every question that I asked her, wasn't helpful in helping me get doctors. And like I was really sick, right? Like I'm like
Yeah.
just had a stroke. I'm like bedbound and I'm having to put in all this work trying to like find people that won't dismiss me and can actually get me the right help.
Yes.
And I was like, there has to be a better way for patients like me, because I know there's a lot of patients out there and this is like too much on my shoulders as a patient, like the job of being a patient. And I really just need someone that can guide me through this and see the big picture and really like shepherd me through the process. And I couldn't find anything like that. Like I remember trying different PCPs and one of them saying to me, I've never even heard of half the medications that you're on. And that like did not instill in me a lot of confidence. The
Really?
funny thing was like a few years later now she applied to be a doctor at Chronius and I was like, I don't know if you remember me. But it was funny.
That's
That was
fascinating.
funny to me. But yeah, so Chronius is a virtual, so like a telemed primary care practice specifically for patients who have complex chronic conditions. And so our doctors have specific training, not just in broad internal medicine and family medicine, but also in these conditions like that are really these invisible illness conditions that are hard to diagnose and that especially PCPs don't have usually a lot of experience in. We also have care coordinators and care advocates on our team, and they really take on the burden for the patient of all that admin work. So we do personalized referral searches for patients to
Wow.
find them the right fit. So they don't have to speed date. Like we do that for them. We have someone that can navigate them through the insurance issues, the like social work issues that come around with being patients. And then we have partners that provide mental health therapy specific for patients with chronic illness and nutrition support as well. And I chose to create a telemed practice instead of an in-person practice because one, I know what it's like to be basically stuck in your bed and how hard it is to get out of the house to see the doctor, but also for access because I wanted to make it as accessible to patients as possible. So it basically created the doctor's practice that I dreamed that like would be my dream experience as a patient.
I love it. And what it sounds like to me, and I've talked about this on the podcast, I think a million times, maybe more, how frustrating it is to be an autoimmune patient, go into the doctor's office or get that call that says, hey, you need to come in, you have this disease, and you're just told that you have a disease. Maybe you're told what it is. Maybe you're told what treatment options are out there, but it's very, very high level, and you walk away with more questions than answers, and generally pretty damn scared. And for other diseases, like the model I've always wanted is the cancer patient model, where you walk in, you get the diagnosis, and then here are 15 different brochures and resources and therapists and social workers and everything to help you navigate this chapter in your life. And I've always thought, well, why can't that be applied to autoimmunity? Why is that? Where's the disconnect here? And so I love, love, love that you decided, fuck that, I'm going to build it since it doesn't exist. Where the hell did you get the energy to do that?
I don't really know looking back. I think it was weirdly, I was in such a low that I was like, even if this fails, who cares? It can't be worse than what I'm experiencing right now. And originally, the idea wasn't for care. The original idea was how can we make it easier to like have all of like a digital binder for all of your health information
Yeah.
because it was so fragmented across so many different doctors, specialists, hospitals, and like I couldn't even compare like, my potassium level across all the places I've gotten my
No.
potassium done. So it was hard to track trends. And that was the original idea. Can I connect all of my patient portals together so it could be one giant patient portal? And we did create that, and that is available for patients for free if you're not one of our patients and you're outside of Florida, which is where we deliver care right now, you can access that platform. But
Wow.
as we built that and we were talking to patients, what I realized was like we only can control so much of the patient experience just by helping them prep for their visits in a better way and organize
Totally.
all of their information. We really need to offer the care ourselves to deliver the care that we think that these patients deserve. But it came from a place of just like, I had no idea what I was doing and that I had never worked in healthcare before, right? That wasn't my background. But I knew so deeply what these patients need because that's what I needed. I
Right.
experienced the problem myself that it was really about finding the right team of people to come on board who really shared my vision and the mission of caring for this patient population that I think is just really underserved in the healthcare system and really just dismissed by the healthcare system, even though it's a
Fully.
huge number of people. So it was a step by step process. It was like, I have this idea. I talked to some people about it. I talked to my best friend from business school. What do you think about this? And, I need to find someone who can help me build software. Her husband, who I knew for a long time, was a software engineer at some big banks. And I said, can you help me find someone who can like build this software with me? And he's like, I'll do it with you. I believe in this. So that was like the first person who came on board with me was like my best friend's husband doing that. And
I
then
love
it was, finding the first doctor to come in who really like believed what we were doing and it kind of grew from there. But when you have the mission up front that's so different from a typical practice, you tend to attract people who really believe in that mission too. And that makes a huge difference in kind of like the culture that we have within the company, but also in the experience that I think patients have when they come to us.
I think you're hitting the nail on the head. The mission of Chronius and the passion behind it is so completely obvious that anybody that has that space in their heart for this arena, you can't not be drawn to it. It's answering a call that I think a lot of us have. So I'm for one very, very excited and very grateful for you building this platform for us, and I can't wait for where it's going and whatnot.
Yeah, it's been interesting because I've now been on the other side too of like how hard it is to run a doctor's office and
Gives you a
how
lot of
many
perspective and compassion for
yes,
them.
how many messages you get from patients and making sure that we respond quickly and how do you build the capacity to do that. So it gives me more empathy for providers as well because I see the challenges of that
Yeah.
too. But it's just been like a really cool experience to really build something from the ground up and put aside how things are typically done and rethink like, well, what if it could be done this way, in a
Yeah.
different kind of way.
You don't have to fit into the mold. That's like the entire thesis of chronic illness is like we don't fit into a mold. We don't fit into the scientific deductionary process that is the most prevalent form of Western medicine right now in the United States.
Yep.
We have to build our own mold. And so it's wonderful that you're approaching it like this. So I guess maybe well, actually, I have one more question for you on that topic.
Yeah.
Did you feel like you had imposter syndrome going into it, or like, can I actually build and run a company with a chronic illness? Did you have those fears?
I think I had those fears more and more as I went, if that made sense. I think
Yes.
like at the beginning I just felt like I had
Why
nothing to
not?
lose, and in some ways it was a distraction from everything that I was doing, but I could do it in my own pace.
Yeah.
So that was like the nice thing about being my own boss is that like I don't get in trouble if I have a flare and I need to take a break for a few hours or something like that. And I've instilled that into the company too. Like people have
Yeah.
flexible schedules. A bunch of people that work for me have chronic illnesses as well. And so that like I want to create a work environment that supports that. But I think it's grown as I've gone to events where I had to meet other people that worked in healthcare, right? And
Right.
I really felt imposter syndrome of like, I know this a lot from the patient side, but understanding healthcare as a business, I really don't know anything. And I definitely felt imposter syndrome of like, people are going to know that I have no idea what I'm doing. But as we've grown, I realized I actually know a lot.
Hmm.
And the other thing is like I'm in a Slack group that is pretty large for all sorts of people that work in health tech. It's like thousands of people in this and people who run companies that are much much bigger than my company, and they'll post questions that we have been dealing with or questions that we just solved that thing. And my right hand guy always sends those screenshots to me. He goes, we're not like, if you think we don't know stuff, these people are way ahead of us and they still don't know stuff. So
Yeah.
it makes you feel better that like everyone's kind of figuring it out a little bit
Yeah.
as they go. And so I actually think I bring a really unique perspective. There's not a ton of patient founders out
No.
there. And so I think I bring like a really great perspective that is much more patient centric and empathetic than maybe like other types of people that work in healthcare who care about healthcare, but they don't have like that personal connection to it. So it's something I'm still working on, but it's kind of ebbed and flowed as I've, you know, been on this journey.
Well, that makes sense. And it sounds like you've also built a team around you that rounds out the areas where you feel like you don't know as much, which is exactly what a founder should do, always, and a good leader always should do. So I'm happy to hear that. Let's dive into Chronius.
Yeah.
What is it? How do patients access it? And give us the 411.
Yeah, so kind of as I mentioned before, we're a telemed primary care practice right now for patients who are living in Florida, though we're going to be expanding that in the coming year to other states.
So excited.
Um, and there's a few things that make our care different. One is we have a lot longer appointments than the average primary care practice. So I think we've all had that experience of you have like 6 minutes with your PCP when they come in. You feel like you
Yep.
don't have time to even explain what's going on before they're out the door. So our initial appointments are 60 minutes long. Our follow ups are 30 to 45 minutes long. So you really have time to get into everything with your doctor, and they really care about your story and learning your story,
Mhm.
and understanding what your goals are as a patient. So that's one thing that I think is a big differentiator for us. The other is really this care coordination is so good. Like I don't live in Florida myself, so I can't be a Chronius patient yet, and I can't tell you every day how I'm like, oh, I need to be a Chronius patient because this is so good and I need this and I don't have it.
Yes.
Where we have a really big care coordination team that's much bigger. Like most doctors' offices, primary care don't have that at all. But
No.
we do like those referral searches for you. We're doing all those forms, the FMLA, disability forms, letters, which a lot of doctors' offices won't even do
No. Or
anymore.
they'll gripe about it and then you feel so
Then you feel
guilty.
bad. And,
Oh,
and we do that for our patients. We will go and fight to make sure we get you things that you need that are covered under your insurance. And we will call doctors' office. Like if you can't get in touch with your specialist, our care coordination team will call to make sure that like the ball moves forward for you and really advocate for you. And
that's
then
amazing.
our care advocate who's on our team, which is in addition to the care coordinators, is amazing. She worked as a pharmacist for decades and then became one of the first board certified patient advocates. And she just helps you know how to beat the system, basically. How can I get
Yes.
this thing covered that keeps getting denied? Or she'll attend specialist visits with you virtually. So you have someone that's
Wow.
like there in your corner, like advocating for you in your visits when, you feel worried that you might be dismissed.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of relationship and support is so critical. I mean, our doctors, like I was just seeing today, our patients, well, like you probably experienced too, like my symptoms affect so many systems of my body. I have so many
Yes.
specialists. I have a neurologist, a cardiologist, a gastroenterologist, an endocrinologist, an OBGYN, like all of these.
Yes.
But they're all like so tunnel vision on just what they're doing and they're not seeing the big picture.
Mm-hmm.
Anytime you see a specialist, we make sure we get those notes from that specialist. Our doctors read those notes and then they will reach out to you and say, here's what I think about what your specialist said and the plan. Here's how I think it might impact other things that are going on. And
Wow.
here's what I think the step forward is. Like, nobody does that,
It's
right?
a
So,
quarterback.
yeah. So, someone that's really seeing the big picture and proactively communicating that to you. So, the way that people can sign up is they can just go to our website, which is croniushealth.com, or they can go to chronicillnesspcp.com, and you can self-schedule your appointments, which is another honestly great thing because how many of us have like been on hold for so long trying to schedule an appointment.
Oh,
Our availability is really transparent. You can self-schedule. It's really easy for you to like book a visit. Our doctors don't have long waits to be able to see them. So you can go online and book an appointment. And then the other thing I'll say is like we try to be as affordable as possible because like I know from personal experience that specialist that I see that specializes in Sjogren's and POTS together and had a year and a half long wait list, her new patient visits are when I started they were $1,000. Now they're $3,000.
oh my God.
These are like the only conditions where you can't find doctors that take insurance and
Yeah.
that you have to pay so much money to get anyone who understands. And so affordability is something that's really important to us. So we currently take Cigna and Aetna, but for patients, and we're working on getting in network with other insurers and Medicare and Medicaid as well. But for patients that don't have the insurance that we take, we have a very low cost per visit. And then we have a very low monthly fee that basically covers all of that care coordination services that we're doing for you, the app that's $40 a month. And I wanted it to be like affordable because I
Yeah.
think that that's the ethical thing to do. Like you shouldn't have to go into debt to see doctors that understand your condition. So that's been a really important thing. And so patients should know that we're focused on making sure that we can be as affordable and in network as possible.
That is just such a breath of fresh air, and hearing you put that as the forefront, as the North Star that you guys are working towards is amazing. Accessibility from both a time and resources perspective, and then also offering all of the services that truly we need. So when you, let's say a patient decides to pick up the membership and onboard, what does the onboarding process look like? And then how frequently do you have correspondence with your team?
Sure. So when you sign up with us, you'll book an appointment as the first step. After you book an appointment, you'll have immediate access into the Chronius platform, which we call the Patient Empowerment Platform.
I love that.
And you'll get access to our intake form, which is pretty robust. But the reason why it's pretty robust is because we want to capture as much information as possible before your visit that our doctors can review. So the majority of your time in your new patient visit can be focused on really telling your story and setting your goals and what the next steps are versus talking through like all the like nuances of like your surgical history or your family history and things like that.
Yes.
So you'll complete that form. And if you want to, you can also connect any of your patient portals that you have from other doctors' offices to your Chronius account so that you can pull that information in.
Wow.
You can start tracking your symptoms in the app right away. You can track your vitals there as well. And then you'll have your first patient visit, which will be an hour with your physician. After that, you'll get a care plan that's very detailed. Our doctor's notes are the most detailed I've ever seen. Like a 10-page clinical note and care plan is not unusual coming from our doctors. So you'll get a very detailed care plan after your visit. And that care plan will be helpful not only for guiding what your next steps are, but then you'll have a really robust history that you could bring to specialists and other things as well that can be helpful in telling your story. As soon as the care plan is sent over, that's when the care coordination team really jumps in. So we'll get started on getting your preferences for all of your referrals so that we can find the right fit for you. We'll send you any patient education resources that we think might be appropriate. And if we need to gather any records, we'll send you a quick form to complete that you can get that ball rolling as well. And then we communicate with you as we're doing it, of letting you know how much time each step will take, so you have that transparency. It's a lot of time in healthcare. Wow. It's like a black box of what's happening. And then we have a HIPAA compliant messaging system. We have a nurse that staffs our messages, that reads every message, make sure it goes to your doctor or the right person on the team. But some of our patients, they're messaging every single day to us and we're communicating with them. Some touch base, just occasionally, but we're there as a support. So however often you need to message us, know that someone is reading it and responding to you. Wow. We say within 2 business days, but usually it's same day that we get back to our patients. And then, that's the experience. We'll set you up with all the appointments that you need. We'll make sure everything's sent over so you don't have to do anything. And then we set up the next visit with you, but you also have, urgent care access within our team too. So we have same day appointments available if you have, COVID or the flu or stomach something. And to be able to have that urgent care type support with someone who understands these conditions is also super helpful.
Absolutely.
And the experience is a little bit different for every person depending on what their care plan says. Right. So we are not like a one size fits all, like we do the same treatment plan for every person who has X condition. Every plan is personalized for that patient's
as it should be.
Yeah.
As it should be. We can all have the same diagnosis, but how that presents in each of us, or the degree of impact to our lives, is very much a snowflake. So I love that it's very hyper individualized.
Yeah.
Speaking definitely. Of, how do you do that? How do you approach the matchmaking between a new patient and a provider and the care team and coordination team?
So patients really can pick, it's their choice of which provider they pick. So they'll see on our website bios of all of our physicians, and they can pick which one, because we very much believe in the patient should have a voice and a choice in their care, and so they should have the ability to choose. Say every single one of our providers, we have training that they need to go through for several weeks before they're ever allowed to meet with a patient on these conditions. So everyone has gone through that training and really has the expertise. But really what I'm looking for when I've hired doctors is, number one, are they clinically very smart, and are they open to figuring out something if they don't know the answer? And then number two, what kind of are they warm? Do they have empathy? Because I think both of those things are important. So many of us have seen doctors who are really good doctors, but their bedside manner sucks and it feels terrible as a patient. And on the flip side, you could have a doctor who has great bedside manner, but if they can't really help you or don't have knowledge, then it's not really useful.
Yeah, so, you feel like you have to settle.
Absolutely. Every single one of these doctors, the decision was would I be okay with this person as my own PCP? Would I want this person as my own PCP? And if it wasn't a hell yes, then it was a no. So all of them are fabulous and go really above and beyond for their patients.
That's amazing. How did you develop the kind of onboarding process that you have for these physicians?
The training process?
Yeah.
So what we did is we worked with a doctor at Yale Medicine who was an internal medicine doctor who connected us with specialists at top, academic medical centers across the country who are specialists in each of the conditions that we picked, like the 30 most common conditions that we see in our practice. Everything from autoimmune diseases to chronic fatigue syndrome, long COVID, fibromyalgia, celiac, IBS, endometriosis, all sorts of things, thyroid conditions. And we built what we call a patient journey map for patients with those conditions with each of these specialists. So that was like, what are all the symptoms that could possibly show up? What are all the diagnostic test options? What are things that primary care can do? And what are things that have to go to different specialists? And what are those tests? What is the official diagnostic criteria for this disease? And then what are different treatment options? Like what's the first line of treatment, second line, third line? And so we built like this really robust training that has that like journey map that we've built for patients so that we could know, like, did we check the box on all of these different things? Did we consider these trainings? And then we combined that with, recent like highly cited journal articles about these conditions and nuances, as well as video training for our providers. Wow. Around, new topics that have come up, like from annual conferences on these conditions as well. So we're constantly, working on and improving as new things come out as well. So we want to make it like interactive for our providers so it's not boring for them to complete. But I think like what they've said is like, 50% of it was like really helpful to get that initial training, because they said a lot of these conditions you don't learn about in medical school, or it's like a sentence in a book. And unless you had a patient who had it during your residency or just in your practice, you just wouldn't know about it.
Totally.
But then a lot of it is like, our patients, like there's definitely trends in the patients that we have and the conditions that they have and the symptoms that they show up with. And the first time they see it, they're like, oh, this is like very different than anything I experienced before. But by like the third patient, they're like, okay, I can handle this, because like actually once you get over like this is something that's like I haven't seen a lot of, and now they've seen a ton of it, right? So it's like normal. One of our doctors joked the other day, they're like, I almost have to remind myself that most people don't have POTS, because like there's so many of our patients come to us with like all of those symptoms, and a lot of our patients have POTS, for example, and Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, autoimmune diseases and things like that, you have to remind yourself that like not everybody has that, Yeah,
that's not the norm, actually. Speaking of patients coming to you with these diagnoses already, do you guys take patients that don't have a formal diagnosis but are presenting with potentially an autoimmune disease or other chronic condition?
Absolutely. So we have patients that come to us in a lot of different stages of their journey. We have patients that come to us who have symptoms but no diagnosis and are looking for help with a diagnosis. We have patients that are very newly diagnosed and are looking for help on like, how do I create a treatment and management plan for this? We have patients that are with us who have been diagnosed for a long time, but they're just looking for someone that can help them, like continue to manage, because like, as you saw from my story and many people's stories, it doesn't just like stay the same once you've got it, like things still ebb and flow. Yeah. But our doctors also help people find things that they didn't even have on their radar as something that could be going on. For example, we have a patient that came to us for POTS, but they had an infection on their hand that just like wouldn't get better, and nobody could figure out what it was. And we went through their records and found something in their blood work that no one had addressed. And it turned out that the patient had primary immunodeficiency, and we were able to help them get on IVIG, and all of a sudden their whole life changed for something that wasn't what they came to us for, but something that they had never been diagnosed with, that they had been dealing with for a really long time because someone missed it. And we were able to find that, get them on the right treatment plan, and they're like, my whole life has changed. So I think you could come to us with, I think I might be having this, and I need help diagnosing it, Or we might find things that, you didn't even know you had. And it's like having someone who's willing to like really dig into the details of your story and your
Yeah.
record to make sure that we aren't leaving any stones unturned.
I think every chronically ill patient at some point in their life wishes that the Doctor House TV show character
Yes.
was real. And it feels like you guys are building exactly that. And one of the things that brings me the most comfort in this too is as someone with, several autoimmune diseases and chronic illnesses, if I get quote unquote normal people sick, sometimes that gets missed because I have all of these chronic illnesses and it's easier to point a finger at that than at anything else. So the fact that you guys go through these records with a fine-tooth comb and like really, really try to connect all the dots, it's just so refreshing. And I think lowers probably patients' anxiety about, what if, which is a game we all
Absolutely.
play.
We have one patient who, like, anytime any of her doctors say anything or she has to go to the ER, whatever, she always like asks our doctor first, do you agree with this before I do this? Because she just trusts her PCP
Yeah.
with us so much that she wants to make sure that they're totally in on the plan and that because she just trusts like that they have her best interest and are really looking at everything. So she's always reaching out to be like, is this okay? And we have no problem
Yeah.
answering that.
Having a sounding board and a quarterback is just unreal amazing. Speaking of ERs and hospitalizations, how do you all help with kind of coordinating on that front and guiding patients on navigating both of those experiences?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's actually something we were just talking about as a team last week. So I
Awesome.
think one, like something that's exciting about what we're doing is the patients that come to us, we've seen a big reduction in their number of ER visits since they started with us. We've had patients who had done 20 ER visits in the 3 months before they started with us, and in the last 3 months with us, they did 2 ER visits. So it's a
Wow.
huge difference, and I think that's for a few things. One is when they think they might need to go to the ER, sometimes they reach out to us of like, what do you think I should do? And we're able to help them kind of triage and figure out if that's the appropriate place for them or not.
Yes.
Because some things with chronic illness are handled well in the ER, but some aren't. And so we can help them figure out and feel confident, like that they know what to do. Like even for me with my POTS, when my heart rate was so high when I started, and that felt so scary to me. And like, am I having a heart attack? Like, do I have to go to the hospital if my heart rate's like 180? And now I know that it's like, well, it's uncomfortable, but it's not unsafe,
Yes.
And so like I don't
Yes.
need to go to the hospital if my heart rate goes really high, unless other symptoms are happening, and I know what those are. But there's a few things that we've done. So one is if a patient is going to the ER and we send them there, our doctors will call the ER when they're on their way to give them a heads up of what's going on.
I love that.
Additionally, for a lot of our patients, we will write letters and give it to them that they can bring with them to explain what the patient has and what their condition is and what they need to try to limit as best we can them getting dismissed at the ER. We can't like 100% prevent it, right? But we can do what
Right.
we can to try to be like, this patient needs IV fluids because of this. So make sure that that happens because we know a lot of patients with these types of conditions can be seen as, drug seekers or things like
Yeah.
that when that's
Frequent
not what's
flyers.
happening. Yeah, or they're just being dramatic, wanting
Mhm.
attention, which we know is not actually what's happening. So we will do those letters. Things that we're working on right now that we're going to be launching soon is one, we're going to be launching what we call like a flare care plan for some of our patients, where it'll be like a 3 month plan that you'll meet with your Chronius doctor monthly for 3 months. And every other week, you'll see a nurse within Chronius as well. Plus, we'll build what we call like a flare care checklist, which will kind of red, yellow, green, like if these are your symptoms, this is what you should do. If these are your symptoms, like it's a little worse, this is what should happen. And if this like red level is happening, this is what you should do. So you know what your
Amazing.
baseline care plan should be, But also, if things escalate, you can like implement that plan of like what's like the rescue med kind of that I need. We're basing this off of like similar to what asthma patients have, these kinds of plans.
Yeah.
And so we're building that for our patients, for some of our patients too, who, maybe having like their symptoms aren't totally regulated right now. And so they need that extra support. And so we're building that out. And that's something we should be launching in January.
I'm so excited to see you guys roll that out and hear about it because that is epic. That like I don't think that exists anywhere for us, and I'm really glad to hear that you guys are putting your brains together and creating it.
We know how big of a problem it is for patients going to the ER or being admitted and being completely dismissed, having a horrible experience there.
Yeah.
And so we want to do everything that we can to help the patient advocate for themselves and have us advocate. So if a patient's admitted, we'll reach out to like the charge nurse and let them know who we are, if the patients are okay with that. And we'll have our patient advocate reach out to the hospital's patient advocacy office to make them aware of us as well, because you want to feel like you have someone in your corner
Yes.
when you're in the hospital. And so, our doctors go out of our way to do that for our patients.
I think that's amazing. There's nothing scarier, in my opinion, to be in the hospital by yourself, not being taken seriously, symptoms off the charts,
Yep.
and just feeling hopeless.
Yep.
So knowing that that is being put in place is amazing. Do you guys, kind of like speaking of advocacy work and whatnot, do y'all do training for the patient on like how do you approach advocating for yourself?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we do that by having patients meet with our care advocate if they want to do that. So they could reach out and schedule an appointment at any time with our care advocate. And really, the care advocate can help them with everything from like, can you teach me how to advocate for myself? But also like, here's things you should say to the insurance company versus like in the hospital versus different situations. So they're there to either walk the patient through that and train them or like their loved ones, but also they can do it on their behalf as well.
That's amazing.
And then we're continuing to work on expanding our kind of patient resources to have things like a checklist of what to say and not say in the hospital so that you could get the right care. Like what are the buzzwords
Huge.
that are good and the buzzwords that aren't good.
Yep.
So we're like always working kind of building. We just did a huge guide for insurance for our patients of like how to choose an insurance plan when you have a complex chronic condition.
Wow.
And like what the different pros and cons are to different options. We sent that to our patients because we know like they need these kinds of resources and support.
Absolutely. I think either you have several years where you figure it out by doing it the wrong way,
Yeah.
or you are lucky enough to grow up in a family that has medical providers and kind of speak the lingo already. So providing these resources, I think, is just phenomenal. For that hospitalization ER, one more question there.
Yeah.
Can you call your advocate to be kind of like on call with you? So when a provider comes into your ER room or ER bay or whatever, they can be on the phone or on FaceTime and help you be kind of like a backup?
Yeah. So basically, what we tell patients to do that if they have been admitted to the hospital, to let us know, and then to let us know if they want to be connected to the patient advocate so they can reach out to them. And then they can build their own plan with the patient advocate of what works best, within the patient advocate schedule and theirs. But our patient advocate is usually like pretty flexible to like work with, especially for patients that are in the hospital. But it's really about you communicating with the patient advocate to figure out like what your needs are and how that works with their schedule.
That totally makes sense. Okay. I think kind of last chapter of questions I have for you is what's next? Like, what's the long-term vision? If you could snap your fingers and fast forward 5 years from now, what does the company look like?
Yeah, a few things. Like 5 years from now, I want the company to be national. So I want this type of care to be available to every patient across the US. So that's a big one for me. And then it's thinking about what additional services can we offer to patients that really provide like that holistic care for their whole person and all of their needs. So the first kind of step that we're taking towards that, for example, is 2025 is going to be about expanding our mental health services that we offer to our patients, like as you and I talked about before,
Yeah.
how important that, like having the support of therapy. So in January, we're launching support groups that are free to our patients in partnership with the Center for Chronic Illness, that are run
Wow.
by licensed counselors who have experience in chronic illness. The Center for Chronic Illness is also amazing. Everyone should check them out. It's free support groups for all types of chronically ill patients. So we're working with them on that, and then the goal is to offer therapy in-house sometime next year as well. And then thinking about, whether it's other specialties that we could bring in-house, things like physical therapy. We basically want to make it a one-stop shop for our patients. When you think about, you talked about like the cancer model. We talked about that a lot at the beginning, like the idea of these tumor boards where you have like multidisciplinary care. These are
Yes.
multidisciplinary diseases, so they really require multidisciplinary care.
Hmm.
And the more that we can bring things so that it really is like a one-stop shop for our patients is what, our long-term goal is.
That's phenomenal. Literally phenomenal. When you also think about kind of the direction and growth of the company, how do you see y'all interacting with like functional medicine or Eastern medicine or different healing modalities that are out there?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I know a lot of practices out there that focus on this patient population do take a more functional medicine approach. I would say like our approach to medicine is very evidence-based medicine is what we're focused on. So I would say it leans more Western medicine, but we do take in some, kind of functional medicine approaches as needed. Right now, we tell our patients that if they really want that functional medicine approach, that they should have a functional medicine provider and that we could work hand in hand with them. And a lot of our patients do. So we work very closely with a variety of functional medicine or integrative medicine providers and to, figure out the right care plan for our patients. But we also, look at treatment options that are outside just pharmacological treatments. So
Yeah.
some of our patients, we prescribe aqua therapy or equine therapy. There's things that are, that they can do that don't require medication. So it's really about figuring out the right plan as long as there's evidence behind it, because we want to make sure that things are safe for our patients. So as
Totally.
long as there's evidence behind it, we're all about it. But I would say we are not a functional medicine practice.
Would you ever consider like utilizing some of the detailed testing that functional medicine providers typically offer, like I don't know, like the OAT test or the second degree stool testing and whatnot that kind of goes that second layer?
Yeah, so I think it would depend on two things. And a lot of our patients do those types of tests now, and sometimes, we can help order them like with another provider, like
Oh,
someone
wonderful.
works with like a nutritionist and they ask us to get certain tests done for them and we'll help get those kind of sensitivity tests done or things like that. I think it's one, having someone on, like it would be about bringing someone on the team who has the additional training in those
Yeah,
types of tests because you don't want to order tests without being able to explain what they mean.
totally
Um,
agree.
so right now, that's why we partner with people externally and then work with patients on that. So it would be about bringing that in. Another thing that we've talked about a lot internally is like there's a lot of companies that you see like advertising on Instagram and TikTok right now that's all about biomarkers and like we do 100 biomarkers. And our point, we've talked about this a lot internally because I was like, when you actually look at what the biomarkers are, and I say kind of biomarkers in quotes a little bit, it's often like majority tests that we order for a lot of our patients, like a metabolic panel, a complete
Totally.
blood count, some hormonal testing, things like that. So most of them are things that we order anyways from our patient. We just don't package it by saying like, and we also don't order the same thing for every patient because
Right.
our point of view is that the blood tests are only valuable if they're going to give you it's not like anyone could order any test. It's harder to know what's the right test to order and then how to interpret that information to kind of what the right next step should be for the patient. And if we do tests that's not really relevant for the patient and it shows something that like may be something, but may not be something. You see this a lot with like these full body MRIs, where there's a lot of research that like, is it actually helpful or not? Because sometimes you'll have like a benign thing show up, but you have to do a lot of like testing on it that could be more damaging than like not. So it's something we're still thinking about, but I think right now our approach is ordering tests that we think are right for that particular patient, but being open-minded that if patients come to us and they say like, I'm interested in XYZ testing, that we're open to, potentially ordering that depending on whether we think like it's within the scope of our experience. And if not, we'll find someone that can do that for them and work with them on it.
I think that open-mindedness is so key. I think, we live in this world that's just so polarized right now where in all different fronts and sides of the world, but just, even in medicine itself where functional or Western can kind of almost demonize each other. And it doesn't make any sense because how can we heal and move forward if we don't give everything kind of the time of day and like really understand if it works for us? So I love that you guys are being open-minded about that. I love that you also say, here's where our line is because we can't help what we don't know to help. I think that's really important.
And that's why like for me, the line in the sand is like, is there evidence around it? And it's about like making sure we use every tool in the toolbox that is available to patients. So like ideally your care plan has things that you could do at home, like lifestyle changes you could make, whether it's like diet or exercise or different therapies. There might be some supplements that make sense to take, and there might be some like pharmacological medications, and like there's some like spectrum of all of those things in terms of like what's the right approach. So you just want to use every tool in the toolbox.
I agree. And because you guys take such a personalized approach to your treatment protocols and whatnot, those tools in your toolbox can be really unique and very tailored to you, which is great.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I love what you guys are building. I am like, my heart is overflowing that somebody has answered this prayer that I've literally had for like 25 years that this could happen. So thank you for building this for all of us.
I think the other thing I just want to say to your audience is like, I know my experience as a patient, but if folks have ideas out there of things that they wish that they had in their primary care practice, like please email me. Our email is hello@chroniushealth.com. Like I want to know what you think would be really helpful to make sure that we don't overlook anything that could make a difference for our patients.
I love that. Yes. And we'll put your email and kind of contact information in the description for this episode. So if people want to get involved in any way that they can find you and hopefully collaborate a little bit, because I think it's amazing that you guys are taking it from a patient perspective.
Yep.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Danielle. This has been a pleasure. I am over the moon excited for you. I can't wait to chat about all things startup also in another time, because that is the other half of my life as well. But for now, thank you. And to everyone listening, love you guys. Go check out Chronius. I think this is going to be the biggest game changer for all of us. And that's a wrap. Thank you so much for joining me for another week of Calling in Sick. As a reminder, I would love for y'all to like, follow, subscribe, save, share with a friend, do all of the things. It truly helps grow this community, and it helps these episodes reach the people that need them the most, whether that's for an educational piece, to have a little laugh, or to not feel so alone. As a reminder, Calling in Sick sits on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify, and anywhere else where you can find your listens. From the bottom of my heart, I absolutely love you guys. Thank you so much for calling in sick with me every Monday. It's been an honor and a pleasure so far, and I can't wait to continue. I can't wait to continue building this community with y'all. Love you.